All right, people, we are starting now. I'm with my friend Base Mama, who I haven't actually streamed with on my channel in quite a while. Oh, and there's a window open. Where is it? Oh, there it is. And yeah, I haven't actually streamed with her on my channel for a while, but she was the person who broke my streaming cherry, popped my streaming cherry, I guess is what we're supposed to say. And she is an ex-Muslim, somebody who converted into the religion and has since quit the religion, which you can explain to people if you feel so inclined. And now we are going to talk about Saudi Arabia's new treatment of women, at least as proposed by the king. Whether or not this will happen in the nation might be another story, because I'm sure all of the radical Islamists might not be particularly apt to actually treat women all that much better. But I don't really know that much about it. Base Mama does.
Well, let's start by reading the article so we know what we're talking about and where we're at.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going to Saudi. So there's numerous articles. They're mostly not coming from the big sources for some reason. For some reason, this should we read NPR's article?
Yeah, and see why that would be any different. It's more about policy change in the kingdom, which is a pretty big deal. I mean, for it to ever happen, it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know. I thought that this was recent, but it looks like this is in May that this was all happening. Um, I didn't know that. Weird. Okay, so I'll look at. I just found out about it today. Had you
Well, I
done
have
this?
it for June 26th.
Oh,
It
where's
wasn't
what's
that
some
long
of
ago.
yours?
The Gulf Insider.
Golf Insider. Okay,
Mhm.
so yeah, Golf Insider. That's what I think I sent to you, isn't it?
Yeah.
Golf Golf Insider. Um, Um, okay, I'm just gonna go into Twitter and find it because I'm bad at Googling it right now. Uh,
Fine.
let's see here. There we go. And I will put it in a new window and we will bring it up. Okay. And present to everyone. Okay. Uh, would you like to read or should I read?
Oh, you go ahead.
Okay, let's see. Don't allow. Fuck off. Saudi Arabia to give women more control over their life choices by relaxing male guardian system is welcomed as another small step for women in the kingdom. Saudi Arabia is well known to be one of the world's most gender segregated nations, where women live under the supervision of a male guardian, cannot drive, and must wear head to toe black garments in public. Women need approval from men to travel, study, and get some health treatments. But local media recently reported that King Salman has issued an order allowing women to benefit from government services such as education and healthcare without the consent of a male guardian. This means women could, in some circumstances, study and access hospital treatment, work in the public and private sector, and represent themselves in court without a guardian's consent, according to Mahi Akil, a women's rights campaigner and a director at the Jeddah-based Organization of Islamic Cooperation. She said, "Now at least it opens the door for discussion on the guardian system. The order made by King Salman pictured is the latest in a series of steps to include more women in the workforce to help diversify the country's economy and reduce its reliance on oil. The trend started in 2011 when the King Abdullah allowed women onto the Government Advisory Shura Council. Women can now vote in municipal elections, work in some retail and hospitality jobs, and were allowed to compete in the Olympics for the first time in 2012. but Saudi Arabia was still ranked 141 in 144 countries in the 2016 Global Gender Gap, a World Economy Forum study on how women fare in economic and political participation, health, and education. The system of male guardianship, which requires women to obtain permission from a father, husband, or son to travel, study, or marry, is an impediment to realizing women's rights. Say rights groups. Akil said, male guardianship is un-Islamic and humiliating for women. Some men take advantage of this male guardianship for their own benefit and abuse it. Some men. That's the end of the article. So, what say you about this article?
Well, I think it's an important step, but one of the things that like it doesn't cover that I'm, concerned with is in some circumstances. So like what are those circumstances? How relaxed is it? And these are probably things we're not going to find out for a while. Um, Saudi Arabia is a theocratic monarchy, but at the same time, it's highly, highly tribal.
Mm,
So you can like the king can say this is how it is, and then leaders of tribes will just blow it off. They don't care.
mhm,
And they don't really have as much power as you would think that they would have to like officiate or overcome tribal elders. They can't really do anything if they if you have a smaller tribe that's further away from Riyadh and they just go, nope, we're not going to do it. What can the king do?
mhm,
So it's a good indication that Salman will be better than his father about it, but it's not necessarily like I want to say like it's a good sign, but don't get your hopes up, you
mhm,
know, because we don't know the specifics of this. Like we don't know if this is, does this mean like you can be a single woman and do whatever you want, or does this mean like if you're a widow, does this only apply to you? Like there's just so much that you're not going to know.
mhm,
Um, I wish there was a way we could find out, but I think it's important that we like acknowledge that there are factions in Saudi Arabia who do want these laws relaxed, and
mhm,
there are even men who are. I mean, some of the loudest voices for stop enslaving Saudi women are Saudi men,
mm,
which I think is kind of sad because women tend to be more connected to their culture and traditional, and they try really hard not to change anything and to keep traditions and stuff, but men tend to be more innovative, or they're more, I guess, focused on efficiency and progress. So it'll help, I think, to it sort of signals to men and to imams even to point out that it's not Islamic to have these guardianship laws, even though it's not technically true. But to make that declaration, to say that a guardianship law is not Islamic, that's going to make a lot of people that have always observed it take a second look at it and go, oh, maybe we're doing it wrong, and relax things a little bit. Like, this is a big deal. I don't think a lot of people realize how huge a deal this is. You can't go outside by yourself. You can't even like go to your mom's house by yourself. Like, you always have to have somebody with you. And even like your 13-year-old son is in charge of you.
mhm,
Like everybody's in charge of you except for you.
mhm.
Stifling, but it's a big deal to be able to like go to school without having to get a note from your dad all the time or your son.
So, what do you think that there was anything that really sparked this, aside from looking to diversify the economy, like they say in the article? Is there anything that might have changed?
It's more like you have these different factions within this family. Like you have some of the family that are educated or grow up. They don't even grow up in Saudi Arabia. They grow up in like the UK or even the US. So they don't go to school there. They don't live around this. So go back when they're older and it's time for them to like take their place among the family, and they're like, this is just, it's not working. It's a huge hindrance to society.
Hmm.
Most of the people in Saudi Arabia don't work. That's one of the weird things about Saudi that a lot of people don't realize. Like, there's almost no women working because everything you do, you have to work from home. So how
Hmm.
many work from home jobs can there be for women who can't leave the house, who can't talk to men, not even online? So you can't even do like a customer service job. Like,
Mm.
there's so little that you can do. So if you can
Oh,
relax that to a point where like you can actually function in society, like be able to go places and go get a job and do stuff, I mean, yeah, it will diversify the economy because Saudi women are very, very well educated, but they're not allowed to use their education. So it's like just sort of a waste, you know?
they are well educated.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was illegal for them to get education.
Well, they usually have to have their father's permission, but for the upper classes in Saudi Arabia, you're talking about people who have doctorates. Um, they're, medical researchers. They have all kinds of qualification, but once you go back to Saudi, you can't use that anymore
Oh,
because you
that's
have a very limited, well, you have a very limited scope that you can participate in. You might have a couple of hospitals, you'll have women's hospitals, things like that, where you're really, really restricted. So there's not really a lot that you can do. Like, you can't do breast cancer research and talk about it because you can't say breast. So you have to say like women's cancer, and that doesn't really mean a whole lot. So it's confusing because there's so much. It is really, really backward in the way that we think of things because it's not an egalitarian society. It's not even like common Arab societies were 3,000 years ago. It's actually even more restrictive and less equal now than it was then. So it's kind of like they've imposed this on themselves and are finding out this is really not a good way to function.
Hmm. So one of the things that I've heard you talk about before, and I don't really know super clearly, will this, do you think, set a precedent for the rest of the Islamic world? Because doesn't the Islamic world look up to Saudi Arabia's government as sort of some sort of ideal?
It's going to depend on how the imams handle it.
Who are
Most
the imams for people that are unfamiliar?
That would be like the grand muftis, like they're sort of, I don't know, like the only thing I can compare them to is like a bishop.
Mm,
Um, somebody who speaks on behalf of a larger area, like region for the religion. So if the imams are, I mean, most Western imams are going to be like, yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. But with Saudi imams, you're gonna have to draw a line. There's going to become a very hard distinction between progressive imams and regressive imams. So because you're already seeing like a lot of like with the advent of ISIS and their really super strict adherence to Sharia,
mhm,
you're starting to see a lot of the Islamic world just be like, maybe we're not such big fans of
mm,
that. Like, it's just not working because yeah, okay, Sharia works if you live in a, 7th century goat herding society in the middle of nowhere. But if you live in a society that's as interactive as we are, and there's, trade and commerce and capitalism and, you know, co-ed education or just any kind of social interaction at all where you can't be that restrictive, it's just not going to work. It's a really dysfunctional way to try to run a society, and it's
mhm,
extremely rigid and brutal.
mhm.
And we just don't need that anymore. We're not an honor-based society. So like it's kind of a waste, to put all your effort into Sharia. But it also restricts your ability to grow and to improve your life because it's, the path or whatever. Um, so it's not really a breach of purdah necessarily. That's the separation between men and women, but it opens the door for more more availability for success, for independent success, because the guardianship laws are restrictive to women, but they're also restrictive to men.
Yeah, because you have to go around with all your family members.
yeah, like you're a freaking taxi driver most of the time, and if you're not, you have to take care of everybody's finances, make sure like even your sisters, let's say you have 8 sisters and you're one brother, that's 8 chicks that you have to be making sure they have everything to eat, have a roof over their head, that any children they have are taken care of. Like it's really difficult
Mm,
to just deal with it. That's what I'm saying. Like it's a hindrance to just running society.
mhm,
And Islamically, there's not really like purdah is the separation of men and women, but it's only a separation of men and women of a certain age, like pubescence, when they're like all hot and bothered for each other generally. So that's kind of like the separation so that you basically don't engage in fornication. I don't know how familiar you are with like Hasidic Jews, but it's kind of the same thing where they just you're not necessarily away from each other. You just sort of keep to one side or the other. Does that make sense?
mm. Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with most religious stuff. I was not raised religious at all, pretty much. So when people talk about religion, it's always like this thing that I don't completely understand.
You're
So
like, uh-huh.
yeah, I'm like, really? That's like I don't know what it's like to believe in something and then realize that maybe that the people have those so many people's stories of coming out of religion ends up being kind of a parable for later things in life. Like you have somebody like Lacey Green who used to be a Mormon, and then when she quit Mormonism, she got into feminism, and then she ended up kind of realizing, wait, this is maybe sort of the
Very
same kind of thing. Like
cult-like and hyper-religious as well.
yeah, it's like people who have, religious backgrounds tend to gravitate towards ideologies and religion. But I am just I guess some sort of a pure-blooded skeptic. So,
Well, I mean, I think it's certainly a big deal for Saudi women to have any freedom of movement at all is a huge deal. And the other, like the weirdest thing about it is that probably there's a lot of Saudi men who are breathing a sigh of relief as well, that they don't have to deal with this anymore. So it's not, I mean, it's sort of one of those oppressive systems that oppresses everyone from different angles. And like I said, I think pointing out, this is not an Islamic system. That's going to be your biggest, I guess, foothold for changing this. Is saying that this is irreligious or this is against the religion, because a lot of people will fight that.
mhm,
So if you have an imam or some kind of interpretation that will support this not being part of the system, then it'll be a lot easier to change it. It'll be a lot easier to uh, shift the system to a new perspective. It is going to be more difficult up, in the highlands and in the more tribal areas. Um, but like even Bedouins, I mean, they're nomadic herdsmen. They don't observe Purdah that much. Their women drive, you know, because it's a necessity of life to interact with each other, and you just can't keep people that separate. You
mhm.
know, um,
When did Saudi Arabia get so hyper fundamentalist? Was it around the 70s, like when Iran did?
um, no, well, with Saudi Arabia, it was around the time of Ataturk, so it'd be like World War II. They were not a kingdom. They weren't unified until Lawrence of Arabia in I think the early 1900s. So it wasn't you know they were just nomadic tribes people, and the Saud family was basically selected by the government of the United Kingdom as one of like the forefront tribal families
Mm,
to become the monarchy there. So they're still in power, but they're not in power because of any real reason other than the UK needed a king, a puppet king, really.
oh.
Um, so I mean, they don't have any kind of they don't really like they don't have a religious um, claim. I mean, they will say that they do, but they don't actually do. So it's kind of weird. Yeah, I think it was World War I want to say. I think right before that or right after that was the formation of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Um, and then I think after about the things were kind of in between. Like if you go back to the 20s, they were probably more conservative in Egypt, even though it was more developed than they would have been in Saudi Arabia because they would have mostly still been nomadic Bedouin tribes, you know. But as they became like it was sort of like as they became more and more intertwined with the rest of the world, they sort of retracted and became more conservative. And that's not going to work. Like I think that's part of why they're changing it is because they've been trying to do it this way and it's not working and it's just repressing everybody.
Hmm.
And I think part of it is probably because they're looking at Venezuela with its high dependency on its oil, and they're realizing that oil is not going to be something they can depend on forever. So they're going to have to diversify or they're going to die.
Hmm.
So that's going to be something else. So and there's a lot economically, there's a lot to be said for expanding your work base, you know. Um, so I don't know. I think it's a good. I know there's going to be a lot of chicks in Saudi Arabia that are going to be thrilled just by being able to like walk outside and not have to have a note from their stupid little brother. Because I do I do know chicks that would have to get a note from their baby brother
Yeah,
to
that's right.
like go to Starbucks.
Have you been to Saudi Arabia?
I have been uh no, like
No.
yes and no. I passed through there, and
Okay.
so it's I've been to Dubai, and that was as close as I wanted to get because it was during the season for the high season for Umrah, which is sort of like a mini Hajj. You go like Umrah is for forgiving your sins, making repentance and stuff like that. And I really didn't care for the way that Saudi people behave toward other people. They're very I don't know supremacist, I guess, about their lineage. So everybody else is less than,
Hmm.
if that makes sense. And that's they're very dismissive of other people from other places and very abusive actually also because they just don't like them.
Because they what?
Well, Islam came out of Saudi Arabia, so their view is that by virtue of the fact that they're Saudi, means that they are like the chosen people, and
Hmm.
they have a very supremacist bent to them,
Hmm.
um, where they're sort of like everybody who's Saudi is perfect by virtue of the fact that they're Saudi, and everybody else is evil or not as good or whatever less than.
Huh.
So that's gonna be something that's gonna be hard to overcome.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
but
Well, if they're worried about their economy crashing, maybe that might have a little uh, speed up the
yeah.
process.
Well, that's why I think it'll help a lot because you have an untapped market of not only supply but also demand in women. Once they start working, they start to consume more convenient stuff, and if they have a certain level of independence, they can have their own apartments or whatever. You're going to have almost double consumption of everything, which is going to give you a huge economic boom
Mm.
that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And I mean, I think it's smart to do it, and I think it's smart to do it in a market where oil is about to fall through the floor because we have our own. We can, drill our own oil. Um, I think that they are projecting that probably the restrictions on drilling for our own oil are going to be relaxed, and so they're trying to make other plans, which they should have done a long time ago, but better late than never, I guess. And then also, this keeps us from, or the West really, from interfering with how they run things. So, like they're in the middle of this huge war with Yemen, and
Hmm.
Saudi Arabia hates Yemen. They hate him for a lot of reasons, but the first one is going to be the fact that Yemen has its own Kaaba, which they really don't like that.
What's
Um,
Kaaba?
the Kaaba is the like black box building in Mecca
Mm,
that is built around this meteoric rock, and um, there was like five of these, on the Arabian Peninsula, and so they built these like square buildings, and they would like worship different gods and stuff there. Well, Yemen has one, and they've kept their rock, and so they don't like that. They like see them as like heretics or whatever. But then Yemen also has a high Jewish population. They have a high Christian population. They are not particularly oppressive to other religions. They're also very fertile. Like I don't know if you've seen like a satellite map of the area. Yemen has a lot of green area because it's got a coastline,
uh-huh.
and it's got a lot of good natural resources. So they're
Actually, you know what? Why don't I pull up a map of the Mideast so that we can look at that for people in the audience, because that might be interesting to look at, because I haven't looked at that. And
oh
so,
no,
map of South or satellite map. Satellite map of Saudi Arabia and Yemen.
hopefully I can see it. I'm on my tablet. So I'm not sure.
So, let's see here. I You're gonna have to tell me which geographical parts are which because it's unmarked.
Okay.
So is this good?
Yeah. Now this whole peninsula, like that's there in the middle. That's the Arabian Peninsula. There
Mhm.
at the top left, that little almost triangular divot
Oh,
is
this part?
Israel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So there at the bottom
Hmm.
along the coastline is Yemen. Oh, you can get another map, but Yemen has more natural resources. It has a lot of
Here, let's just look at Yemen.
raw material and stuff like that. Um, it has a lot of natural springs and stuff like that. So it's a good place, but its access um, to the ocean is really what they're fighting over because Yemen controls the shipping routes for oil
Mm,
in that area. So they want to try to like kind of bypass them so that they can get the oil out faster. And they really, really don't like that Yemen has control of that region or that waterway. So a lot of the war has been essentially over just that, um, just the fight over the strait next to Egypt. Can you see the little like the very very tip of Yemen,
right here.
like going yeah. Um, that is a really quick waterway to get the oil from the northeast of Saudi through, like get it around. Otherwise, they have to go way around and carry it across. And so they have like a lot of pipelines and stuff. But this is the strait to the Gulf is of it's not the Gulf of Arabia. It's like the Gulf of something else. Anyway, um, their access to it is what they're after.
Mm,
So because they can bypass the Suez Canal and all that stuff and go around, and they don't have to cross the Mediterranean. So it's just like that's a shipping route that they want control of, and because Yemen has control of it, that's why they're warring with Yemen and dropping roller bombs and all this other crap that they're doing to them, basically starving them out, is
mm,
because they make it untenable for the Yemen government to move oil, then they will eventually give up. They're basically starving them out. They're like hitting them, bombing them from one side, and cutting off access to resources from the other side. And so there's really nothing that they can do except quit.
mm.
You see
How
them like they're just kind of stuck.
how long has this war been going on?
To my knowledge, I mean, they didn't like exactly announce it when they started bombing them, and there's not a lot of like technology or communication that comes out of Yemen that doesn't go through Saudi Arabia. So, to my knowledge, it's been going on for like 4 years,
Okay.
um, which started kind of small and has built up.
Huh.
You know, um, it's just sort of that's the way that they're trying to control it because they're trying to get access to that wealth that they couldn't otherwise get because the government of Yemen and their army is standing in between them. But it's still, I mean, they're really not prepared to deal with the onslaught of Saudi Arabia. So, I mean, I think that a lot of this sort of relaxing things that it's not really them giving up anything by doing this. Um, it's more it's a slight relaxation that will probably take hold in the cities, but outside of the cities, it's not going to matter. It's sort of like slavery in Saudi Arabia today. It doesn't really happen that much in the cities, but once you get out into the suburbs and then further out into the countryside where people are more tribal and live closer to the old times or whatever, it exists and it's largely ignored. Even when it happens in the cities, unless you're talking about somebody who has come from like a foreign country and has managed to get out of it, you're still not going to hear about it. It's just one of those things where like, okay, you know, I guess we'll end slavery, but it's not really over. It's
Mm.
just, if it makes sense, it's lip service to the West kind of thing. And I think that for most women in Saudi Arabia, that's what this is going to be. I mean, for some, it will benefit them, but for most, it's just lip service to the West, and
Hmm.
it's not really going to change anything in their life.
I thought it was weird that this happened right around the same time that Trump visited Saudi Arabia. And of course, every leftist was like, see, Trump is such a hypocrite. He's visiting Saudi Arabia, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, well, we don't really know what he's doing there and why he's doing it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that he can. People don't understand. Force of will is something that is very, very respected
Hmm.
in the Gulf states. So if you're a very forceful personality and you can compel someone by like just talking them around to something or basically saying you're going to do this or I'm going to thump you,
Hmm.
you can change things, but you can't take a diplomatic approach. It's one of the things like people do not understand about Arab culture in general is there is no diplomacy. Like you can't do that. It's just I'm stronger than you. Do what I tell you to do, or I'm going to annihilate you. That's how
Hmm.
you get things done. You can't, you can't go and meet and talk and like that's not going to do anything. Like look how long Israel and Palestine have been fighting. Israel and Palestine have been fighting since the destruction of the caliphate out of Turkey, and that was well before World War II, well before there was any like established state of Israel, whatever, whatever. This has been going on for thousands of years, literally like since the BC era. They've
Hmm.
been fighting over this like plot of land. You can't deal with these people by going, oh, let's have a conversation about it. Like it's never going to happen.
It's like they take that as an invitation to walk all over you.
Well, yeah, of course, because oh, you're willing to be diplomatic and make a compromise. Okay, then we're going to push you until you get almost nothing out of this and somehow say you're thankful for it. Well, one of the good things about having a businessman who is a very good negotiator in this position is that he might actually get somewhere with it. I don't hold out a lot of hope because this is a 10,000-year-old argument,
Hmm.
but at the same time, if anybody's going to get anywhere, it would be somebody who is a hard ass, who's going to follow up on what they say, and they're not going to let somebody, walk all over them because they think they're, oh, I'm the king of Saudi Arabia. Nobody gives a shit. Like, this is the West. Nobody cares that you're the king of podunk no place in the middle of the desert, which, you have a well. Oh my God. Wow. Doesn't mean anything here. So I think
Hmm.
that he was able to impress upon them that their position is extremely precarious with us. And I think that that's a lot of the reason that they're starting to make amendments in the way that they run their society is because they're going to want, he's put them in a position where they have to kiss our ass.
Uh-huh. So
And
you,
I
yeah,
think,
so that's okay, that's you basically answered my question. Um I was talking about this a little bit in my Facebook sphere with people who, don't really know what they're talking about. And I was like, I don't know, I wonder if this has to do something with Trump. It's like, oh, we don't have the Democrats anymore. Maybe we have to kind of start to be something that resembles a reasonable society by Western terms, because we might be on thin ice.
Yeah, and a lot of that, they're starting to they do have a lot of influence in the Islamic world because it is the seat of Islam.
Hmm.
So it will take some time, but they will start to catch up, and they will, other countries will start to interpret this as a relaxation and maybe not, so much of the strict stuff, but that's going to take a long time.
Hmm.
Um, One of the probably the biggest thing to come out of Islam altogether right now is Imam Tawhidi, who is, you can't argue with him. You can't say that he's a heretic. You can't say that he's an apostate. He's an Islamic scholar. He's a Quranic scholar. And what are you going to do? you know? And he's acknowledging the more violent aspects of Islam and going, yeah, that happened. We're not going to do that anymore. Like, so what are you going to say? Like, Islam is a top-down religion. It's not like Protestantism where, like the people decide and that becomes the norm and goes up. That's not how it works.
It's
It
not
comes
like
from
Unitarians.
it comes from the top down. Like, if the imam says something, like anytime you have a question on anything, you go to the imam,
Hmm.
who will always refer to the hadith, the reliance of the traveler, and the Quran, right?
Hmm.
So if you have a school of thought that says, like, basically we're just going to be chill, then they'll just start being chill because an imam said so. Like, that's one of the things about these, Islamic reforms or modernizing and in societies is you always get an imam who comes up and goes, oh, this is not Islamic, we have to shut it down. And so that's when you get the Islamic rebellions and revolutions and shit. But if you have an imam who says, like, look, we're not doing this anymore, and he gets a big enough following, well, then things will change. That's why, like, these reformers, like Najib Nawaz and Rahil Reza and Tariq Fatah, like, yeah, what they're saying is good, but they don't have any authority to say it, and that is why they're under constant threat of death.
Mm.
What are you
Okay.
gonna do? What are you gonna say to an imam? Like, you ain't gonna say shit.
How many imams are there?
Oh God, I couldn't even tell you. Wherever there's a masjid, there's an imam. Wherever there's a mosque, there's an imam. And
Uh,
then you have sometimes there's two or three depending on the size of the mosque, and you have different, like, scholars, and they have, like, universities for this. So I mean, there's
so there's several
thousands.
thousands.
Yes, thousands and thousands.
Okay.
And there are different schools of thought. There's like five main schools of thought, and then there's a few that branch off from there. So, and they're all pretty with the Sharia, they're all pretty observant of the same thing.
Mm.
Excuse me. But in some Islamic societies, they don't have purdah. They don't have the separation of men and women because it's just not, like, functional to
Hmm.
their way of life. So they're just like, nope, screw that. So that's actually a good place to start when you have, like, these older societies that have been around forever and ever, and they don't have this, like, male guardianship crap because, like, they got crap to do, that helps because then changing this, you can defer to that. You can say, well, look, this older society that has kept more to the path, they don't have this. This is some innovation, and innovation is like the top sin in Islam. Like, you do not add to the faith.
Mm.
So if you say something like a guardianship law is an innovation, and you can actually frame it in a plausible way, that will be dropped like a 50-pound sack of rotten potatoes. Like, nobody wants to carry innovation anywhere near them.
Mm.
So I mean, it's an opportunity to flip a lot of stuff on its head. I just don't, I'm skeptical of the impetus, but at the same time, it's always good to have progress anywhere you can have it, anywhere there that it is to be had.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, well, that's really cool. I I wonder, what do you think that this will mean for ISIS?
Oh, ISIS is going to turn it up. They're going to get worse.
Yeah,
Oh,
because they're
naturally.
gonna be feeling like their religion's being compromised.
Yeah, I mean, ISIS has gotten a really, really strong hold all over the world. I mean, that's really the problem with ISIS is that they were ignored
Hmm.
for so long by all of these different governments and different sects that they were like, oh, this is just these weird fundamentalists, whatever, ignored them and didn't think that they were going to get anywhere. But see, the problem was when you create a power vacuum, which is what happened. Um, like going into Libya, going into Egypt, going into Syria, we destroyed their governments and then created a power vacuum with nobody in charge. So there's always going to come up some group or some force. And with Al Qaeda kind of just ruined and not really anything, and you had all these different factions like FSA, Al Nusra, things like that. They they had to rally around something. So you have this like leader who says, "Oh, I'm an Islamic scholar. I'm going to teach you, the true way and the true path." And so all these people that want to be like hyper rigid fundamentalists, they're going to be attracted to that. When you ignore it, of course that's what you're going to get. It's going to be worse, because you're trying to suppress it or pretend like it's not there so it can grow and fester without being watched over.
Hmm.
And ISIS is even in the Philippines now. Like, so we have them in, Iraq and Syria, in Iran, they're in Saudi Arabia, we know. They're in the UK, we know. They're in the Philippines, they're in Malaysia, they're in Australia. They're everywhere because ISIS isn't like it's not a group that's from a specific region. It's not a group that, wants to go to a specific place, you know what I mean? Their
Hmm.
whole purpose is to force the end of days to come to being immediately.
Mm.
Like they're like the worst. Like, how you get like hyper religious Christians who are like, yeah, we need to, make we have to make Zion be a thing so that the end of days will come around and we'll have Armageddon and stuff like that. They don't do anything, they just talk about it, right?
Yeah,
Okay, these people are gonna do something.
yeah.
And that's what they're doing, which is why they're a problem, because they're doing something. Um, so like ISIS is an ideology that's to hold true, to force the Mahdi to come,
Mm.
and I'm sorry, the Mahdi. Um, they want to force the end of days to come around, and like that's what they think they're working for, is the end of to bring about the end of the world.
Hmm.
So they're driven by that kind of crazy. And the thing is, with people being so disenfranchised and pulled away from each other and absorbed into technology, people are very, very lonely and lack purpose.
Mm.
So this gives them a place to go, like that they don't actually have to like go somewhere to meet up, like they meet up online, you
Hmm.
know, and they get instructions for how to do stuff and they talk about stuff. Occasionally they'll meet up in areas, but like they've created a way to radicalize people that doesn't require other people,
Hmm.
which is really fucked up, but that's what it is.
It radicalizes lonely people of the Islamic faith.
Yeah, and you don't ever have to come into contact with another person who is involved in ISIS. You never have to. The ideology is such that, if you want to do this, if you, believe, if you're a true believer, if you're faithful to the word of Allah, you have to do this. You have to strike terror into the hearts of the enemies of Allah. And that's what you do. So it's basically they just get kind of amped up. Like the Sufi assassins, they had to like not only amp them up, but they had to make their whole life about training to kill people, and they had to, basically get them high to go get them to do stuff. You don't even have to do that now because people are so disenfranchised and they hate the world and so much that they'll destroy anything. Like the value of life has become something that we just don't care about anymore. And so you
Mm.
don't have to convince people to kill other people. It doesn't take as much work, you know,
Mm.
which is really sad, but that's the truth of it.
Wow. Well, I'm thinking of ending the stream pretty soon because I'm supposed to. I thought Game of Thrones was coming on yesterday because I thought yesterday was Sunday until I got over to my friend's house and she was like, "Oh," and then we started. She was nice. She put it on. Like we've already watched it, and I'm like, "Wait, I thought it didn't come out till." And she's like, "Oh, I thought you wanted to watch last week's episode," and I'm like, "Wait." It's not Sunday, and so I'm gonna actually go back over to my friend's house pretty soon and
Oh,
watch
cool.
Game of Thrones. Is there
I've
is there
never
any other
seen Game of Thrones.
what?
I've never seen Game of Thrones.
Oh, it's so good. It's really,
I'll
really,
have to
really
watch it.
good.
I'm gonna have to wait until it's over and just binge watch it.
Yeah, it's very binge watchable.
Okay,
Um,
good.
but maybe some questions for the chat, real quick. Is there any other things that you want to say?
No, I'm interested to see where this goes. I'm interested to see like how people take this on and incorporate it
Hmm.
and how far they'll push to make it happen.
Hmm.
I really like this is one of those things where, the king declares it, now it's up to the people
Mm,
to make this something that they can uphold and live by and fight for.
yeah, but the king doesn't have a whole lot of religious clout necessarily.
Not particularly. I mean, he can say it, but it's like,
Is there somebody who has like the highest position religious?
that would normally be the Caliph,
Uh-huh.
um, but we don't. Well, ISIS declares itself to be a caliphate, but in the I want to say it was 1924, I think, when the caliphate, the Ottoman Empire fell. That was actually the last existing caliphate, which a lot of people don't know. The Ottoman Empire was the caliphate, um, but now it's sort of up in the air, and that anytime we could have it again. As long as they establish it. So like the like ISIS thinks it's a caliphate, but it's not recognized by anybody outside of it. You know? Um, so I guess technically yes, we do, but it's just not powerful enough to be anything more than a murderous nuisance on the world stage. But they don't control really anything or any kind of production or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, they could. If we had been able to ignore them longer, they would have gotten a really good stronghold on an area, and we'd have been screwed.
Mm.
Mm. Is there anything else?
Um, gosh, I think you pretty much covered all my questions, and covered them in a fairly short amount of time for a stream, and so I think that might be good to cut it off so that people can watch it later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be lots of questions that neither of us are thinking of. I'm just like kind of psyched about it. So I'm trepidatious, but also hopeful.
Hmm. Yeah. I this is uh I'm sorry. Someone asked the question, did things get awkward just now or is it just me? But I
It's
don't.
just you. You just make things awkward,
Yeah.
person in the chat.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna cut it off now. It was great talk to you.
It was good to talk to you too. I'm glad we got to stream, and I'm glad we got to stream on such a good thing. I'm actually kind of psyched, dude.
Okay, sweet. Bye.